keep telling yourself it's time to write. But the moment you sit down to actually do it, either your brain goes completely blank or into overload mode. There's a way that you can get around this. I'm talking about the smallest possible win. It's actually your brain's back door to building momentum. In this video, I'm going to show you how this works and how you can use this little tiny trick to get the words flowing again. And by the way, for those of you who know me and know my channel, you may have noticed that I have a new backdrop this week. I really want to hear what you think about it. Do you prefer the spaceship? Do you think this is better? If you can let me know why, I would really appreciate that because I'm looking for your feedback because this channel is all about helping you. So if you let me know in the comments, I would love that. All right, so on to the video. So here's what most writers don't realize. Motivation to write doesn't come first. Dopamine comes first. Now, I'm sure you've heard about dopamine. We hear about it all the time related to social media, right? If you put out a post and people like it, that gives you a dopamine hit. Anytime that something happens to us that makes us feel good, usually it's because dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in the brain, is released at that moment and it makes us feel good. It is our reward neurotransmitter. Dopamine, when it comes to writing, has to come first. You can't wait to be motivated to write. And this is where it gets really confusing because we think, I need to be inspired, or I need to feel like I'm in the writing mode, or I need to sense that connection with my creative self before I can sit down and write anything that's going to be of any value. I understand this because I used to think this myself, but the problem with that thinking is that it keeps you from producing as much writing as you could. Sure, there may be days when you do feel inspired and you'll sit down and you'll get some writing done. Maybe you'll get into the flow of it. You'll get a lot of words on the page, but then probably the next day you won't feel the same. And you may have several days in a row that you don't write at all because that inspiration isn't there. So this keeps you stuck in a very slow mode. Maybe you haven't even finished your book because of this, or you haven't finished the next book you wanted to finish. So the key here is to turn this around and to understand that dopamine has to come first. Well, what do I mean by that? Let me tell you. So whenever you complete a task, and it doesn't matter how big or how small the task is, your brain shoots you a little bit of dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter. And dopamine is the one thing that makes you want to keep going. Anytime you get rewarded for something with a release of dopamine, you want to do more of that thing. It's how social media keeps us trapped on their platforms. If we are rewarded by a like or a comment or something from somebody, or even if we just see something that we enjoy that gives us a dopamine hit, then we want to keep perusing that social media feed. This is how they keep us locked in to their platforms. The same thing, though, you can use it to your advantage. You can create these dopamine hits yourself and attach them to your writing process. So if you're waiting to feel ready, or waiting to feel inspired to write, or waiting until you feel like you're up to speed and you might actually get something good written today, that's one thing that I'm always doing. I'm not quite awake enough, or I have too much brain fog, or I was too busy last night, or whatever, to be able to write anything of any quality. But that's the trap. That's the mental trap. And that leads us into procrastination, which we don't want. We want to get something done today, even on the days when maybe we're not 100%. So if you're waiting for that clarity, or you're waiting for your brain to be sharper, or you're waiting to feel inspired, then you're probably just going to continue to go around and around in that same loop because you're not giving your brain what it needs to get started. The getting started is always the hardest part, right? Maybe you've scheduled a time to write, but then when it actually comes to that moment and you need to pull out your laptop and you need to start typing, then your brain starts telling you all these other things you need to do. Maybe there's housework that needs to be done, or you need to call a friend, or you need to do XYZ all of a sudden. That takes precedence over your writing. The reason it does that in that moment is because your brain doesn't have a reason to start writing. Your brain thinks that it's going to get that dopamine hit that it wants from these other things, like perusing your social media feed, calling up that friend you want to talk to, doing some of that housework that you know you can do really easily that's going to leave you feeling accomplished. I mean, even doing a little bit of housework gives your brain that sense of accomplishment. Whenever your brain finishes something, some sort of a task, you get that dopamine hit, and that's going to make you feel good. And a lot of days it feels like vacuuming the floor is going to be a lot easier than writing the next scene. So this is why your brain comes up with all these excuses and other things that you need to do besides write. We have to flip this. We have to give the brain what it needs to be able to get started on writing. And we have to do that first. not wait for that to come from somewhere else out of the air for the brain to have that, to be willing to work with us and start writing that day. So the question then becomes, how do you create that kind of win, especially on those days when you're not feeling 100%? Let's break it down. You know how it goes. We tend to send goals like, I'm going to write 2,000 words every day. Or I'm going to spend an hour every day working on my story. This week, I'm going to finish this chapter. These goals feel productive and they feel inspiring when we put them down on paper or when we imagine them in our minds. We think, man, I'm going to get all this stuff done and it's going to be great. I'm going to come to the end of the week and this chapter or this series of chapters is going to be done. And man, that's going to be awesome. It all sounds good when we're thinking of these goals. But then when you actually sit down and you've got this big goal in front of you, you got to write 2,000 words, or you got to finish this chapter, or you need to spend an hour on this book. Suddenly it feels a lot more overwhelming in that moment, especially if you're not 100%. Maybe you're a little tired. Maybe you have a little brain fog. Maybe you had a really stressful day. All of a sudden that goal that sounded so good when you were setting it up now sounds really overwhelming and like way too much for you to accomplish on that day. So the brain steps in, and I've talked about this in my other video about your procrastination friend, steps in to make you feel better by going and perusing social media or calling your friend or doing something that seems more rewarding in the moment. Anytime your brain interprets something as too hard or too much, it's going to trigger avoidance. It's going to trigger your procrastination friend to step in and pull you away from your writing. So that's what we don't want. So if your regular goals are backfiring, that's what I'm talking about here. That's why we need to flip the script and say, what does the brain actually respond to? Let's talk about that. So where we want to go here is we want to go to really small goals, to really small wins, to really small things, little tiny goals. These tiny goals, the key to why these work is because they lower the brain's resistance. Your brain is not going to freak out when the task feels really easy, but it has to feel really easy. So we can get caught in this because we think, well, I want to write 2,000 words a day, or I won't get this story done, or I want to finish this chapter a week, or it will feel like I didn't really do anything. But that is what sets up the brain to resist. We want to give the brain a chance to say, yeah, this is no big deal. I can do this. This is easy. What we forget is that completing even one small task, teeny tiny, writing 50 words, for example, even writing 10 words, when we do that, and you know how this feels because I know you've done it, you give the brain that dopamine hit, you give the brain a sense of accomplishment. This triggers that dopamine release, which then makes you feel good. When you feel good about what you're doing, you want to do more of it, right? So if you say to yourself, you know what, this week, I'm just going to write 50 words and I'm going to do it in 15 minutes for 3 sessions that week. Piece of cake, right? So 15 minutes after your lunch break, or 15 minutes before you go to bed, or 15 minutes after you first get up, and all you got to do is write 50 words. You try that for 1 week and tell me how it works if you've been stuck. Because what that does is it gives the brain this super easy thing, and you're going to think, well, that's not going to matter. I'm going to get to the end of the week and I'm going to have what? 150 words done? That's hardly even worth bothering. Well, here's the trick though. When you do that 50 words, it feels good. You get the dopamine release because you've just accomplished something and the brain rewards you for that. And you think, oh, cool, this is fun. You stick with it. Not always, but a lot of the times you will. You'll stick with it and you'll write more than 50 words that day. Maybe you'll write 200. Maybe you'll write 500. Maybe you'll write 1,000. Whatever happens, that gets the brain started. And that's really all you have to do, because then your natural love of writing is going to take over. Again, maybe not every time, but it will a lot of the times. If you try it, you'll see what I'm saying. This is your brain's natural way of working. When we give it that little tiny reward, the reward system kicks in, it makes us feel good, and we want to do more of it. That's how we help ourselves write more, is we give ourselves those little tiny wins. So you might think, well, gosh, I went ahead and wrote 2,000 words today, so I should write 2,000 words on Wednesday. That's a mistake. Keep your goal at 50 words, because if you come back Wednesday and expect that you're going to write as much Wednesday as you did on Monday, if that was your writing time, then again, you are increasing the load, and you're again inviting your brain to resist that because it might sound too hard to do on Wednesday, especially if you didn't get a lot of sleep Tuesday night. Keep your goals small, because every time we step in to the writing process, it feels difficult at first if we don't purposely make it feel really easy, because that's just the inherent nature of writing. writing a story, creating something out of nothing is naturally kind of difficult. It doesn't seem so when we're daydreaming or we're going about the rest of our lives, but when you're actually sitting down to do it, when you actually are facing the blank page, then that difficulty, the natural difficulty that writing a story is, comes to light. And suddenly we can see, geez, this is harder than I was thinking it was going to be. That's why so many people think they're going to write a book, but then when they actually sit down to do it, they realize it's not nearly as easy as they thought, right? So that's why so few people actually finish any sort of a book they write. You can help yourself finish your book by keeping these goals really tiny. The other thing that these small wins do for you is they build your confidence. The more you have these little small wins, you decide to write 50 words on Monday. You ended up writing 500. 50 words on Wednesday. You ended up writing 200. 50 words on Friday. You ended up writing 2,000. Get to your weekly total and wow, look what you just did. You just completed a chapter or maybe a couple of chapters and all of a sudden you're thinking, hey, maybe I can actually do this. That boosts your confidence. That's the way to get from feeling like you're not sure if you can finish this book to feeling like, yeah, I'm doing it. This is moving. You get that momentum, and that is really good for your confidence and really good for your motivation. That next week, you're going to feel even more like tackling that story because of these little small wins that you created for yourself. So let's bring all this down to earth and say, what do these small wins really look like in your daily writing life? Let's tackle that next. So here's where this gets even more powerful. What feels easy to one person might not feel easy to another. So if you've ever tried these little small goals and still felt blocked, you probably just picked the wrong one for your procrastination type. I talk about the 13 different procrastination types in my new book, Escape the Writer's Web, which you can order now. And I've found through my research that the small wins differ. So let's say you're a worrier procrastinator, which is the type number 1 in my book. Worry tends to hold you back in your writing life. So what kind of small win might work for you? Something that is calming, something that doesn't add any pressure on you at all. So it might be write one paragraph of anything. Doesn't even have to be on the story you are working on. Just one paragraph of anything, and you promise yourself you're not going to judge it. Your only goal today is to write it. And you write that one paragraph and you come back the next day. You say, I'm just going to write a paragraph and I'm not going to judge it. If you are a perfectionist type, which a lot of writers have this type in their procrastination blend or as their main procrastination type, you tend to be really afraid of failure. So you overwork all of your materials and you take much longer to finish your book or to put it out there on the market than people who are not perfectionists. So this tends to slow you down in your career progress. So what might be a really easy win for you? Okay, this can be tough because anything you write, you tend to be hypercritical of as a perfectionist. So you want to do something like give yourself permission to write something bad on purpose. So you need to break this habit that everything you write has to be good or has to be perfect and give yourself permission to write something bad, something really awful, something like, some awful book you read years ago that you were like, I can write better than that. Write something like that. Write something awful, write something bad. Maybe take a scene in your book and just really mess it up and see what happens. The cool thing about this is when you do this, often what you'll find is, you know what? There's stuff in there that I kind of like. Because when we do this, we give ourselves permission to be creative. We take the shackles off. We kind of like stop being so hard on ourselves and so critical, and we allow ourselves to be creative. And when you do this, you may find some value in whatever you write. But even if you don't, it helps loosen you up a little bit so that when you do go back to the story, you can be a little less harsh with yourself and just allow yourself to create. If you are an avoider, you tend to avoid your work because you're worried about judgment. So you want to do something that helps you feel competent, helps you feel like you know what you're doing. So a really good idea for a small win for you might be to rework a favorite scene. Find a scene that you really like. You think, this scene, I'm proud of this scene. This one went pretty well. Go back and see if you can improve it. Get that momentum going and then go and write your next scene that you haven't written yet. Because that feeling of competence or that feeling of confidence that you gain when you reread something you did that you actually do like and you think was good is going to bleed over then into the new writing that you create. If you are a fun seeker type, which is another one of the types in my book, then you need to make this fun. You need to make this small win fun. So a really good idea for you is to gamify it. Make it a game somehow. So maybe you put on a 10-minute timer, okay? And you write as much as you possibly can in that 10 minutes, and then you give yourself a reward no matter what. And that reward may be some time looking on social media, maybe one of your favorite treats, a nice cup of coffee, whatever it is, but you gamify the thing. Or maybe you set up a challenge for yourself and say, all right, let's see how many words I can write in 10 minutes. And then you see what you've got. And then the next day you try to beat your record if that works for you. So these are just a few of the types from my book and how you can adapt your small win to the type of procrastination struggle that you have to enable yourself to be more likely to succeed. So your mission of the week, if you choose to accept it, set up 5 tiny wins, just one for each weekday. And if you don't write that often, then that's okay. Do it for the next 5 writing sessions. Nothing ambitious, nothing worthy of a trophy, no best-selling authordom going on here. Just 5 ridiculously easy, doable actions that can move your writing forward. Or if you're working on building your platform, even move your marketing forward. Because small wins work in marketing too. If you're having trouble finding what these small wins might be for you, I've given you several examples in this video, but you can also ask yourself these questions. What would feel almost laughably easy right now? So some examples might be the writing 5 words, but it could also be writing a Twitter post about my new book that's 10 words long, or writing a LinkedIn post about my new nonfiction book, or researching for 5 minutes some potential book promotion sites that I could use. Something that seems really, really ridiculously easy. And then make a list of 5 or 10 or 15, however many of them that you can think of, so you can try them out. The next question you can ask yourself to discover more of these tiny wins is this: if I had only 5 minutes, what could I do? And then here's another one. What part of my project feels kind of fun or low pressure today? Whatever you might be working on, ask yourself that question, and likely you'll come up with an answer. Something that just feels really easy about that project that you can do today. Use that to open the door to your creative side. So write down the 5, 10, 15, however many you come up with of these tiny small wins or tiny goals or micro goals or however you want to think about them. And then go try them this week. The more small wins you can collect in your week, the more your brain is going to start to believe, hey, I can really do this. And that's where you need to be, because that's going to drive you forward more than anything else. And if this video was helpful for you, please consider grabbing a copy of Escape the Writer's Web or the Escape the Writer's Web workbook. You can also take a free preliminary quiz on my site at masterwritermindset.com/find yours. No space, just find yours. That's going to give you a preliminary quiz to start you figuring out what kind of procrastination type you have. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.